I was listening to Talkback this afternoon, and quite frankly, I was appalled. The demonising of the so-called unvaccinated in this country by people who should know better is a stain on this great nation of ours. My position, unlike that of the Prime Minister and the Liberal Party, is crystal clear. Mandatory vaccination is abhorrent. Treating the unvaccinated like lepers is not only grotesque, but it is also unscientific. As Günter Kampf wrote in The Lancet, one of the world's leading medical journals, a week or so ago, there is increasing evidence that vaccinated individuals continue to have a relevant role in transmission. People who are vaccinated have a lower risk of severe disease, but are still a relevant part of the pandemic. It is therefore wrong and dangerous to speak of a pandemic of the unvaccinated. And as for the suggestion that the unvaccinated should pay higher medical fees, or even that the unvaccinated should be denied treatment, medical treatment, which has been made by prominent left-wing individuals, what a joke. What hypocrites! Whatever happened to the left's great dream of public health care for all, regardless of how you happen to get ill, that we've been beaten over the head about for decades? What next? Eat too many Big Macs and you'll automatically be denied access to cardio treatment? Go hang gliding and break your leg and, oh, well, tough luck, no ambulance for you, sunshine, you made a stupid choice. Here's the thought, why don't we just scrap Medicare altogether and everybody just pay their own health insurance according to their health needs and lifestyle choices? It's called private healthcare, lefties, you morons. I'll be chatting to my panel about that. But back to the politics of COVID and mandatory vaccinations. Health Minister Greg Hunt and the government in general seem to be kind of hitting the right note, although this evening, not quite so sure about that in the last few minutes. However, we have just heard that the government is putting a pause. This news has just come through on the December 1st reopening of the international border. It has now been pushed back to the 15th. Hopefully this isn't the start of further COVID hysteria. Shutting external borders to specific nations does make sense, as does keeping an eye on quarantining. With vaccination rates, however, here in Australia at nearly 95%, the government is talking about possibly bringing forward now booster shots. And this is where I start to get a little twitchy. The federal government has a responsibility to govern for all Australians. And 95% vaccinated, terrific though it is, still leaves 5% of Australians, 1 in 20, enough to swing any election, who, for whatever reason, are extremely uncomfortable or even distressed at the idea of being forced to take the vaccine against their will. We've seen peaceful protests, yes, peaceful protests of up to 500,000 Australians across the nation for 3 weeks now. It is unconscionable that these everyday Aussies carry on being demonised on talkback radio or persecuted by the left. You do not abandon your principles and your democratic freedoms lightly, and you certainly don't abandon them at the whim of a few arrogant premiers and health bureaucrats. Tomorrow morning, Scott Morrison and Greg Hunt will be reconvening the National Cabinet. Personally, I think the very idea of the National Cabinet was a huge mistake, giving unprecedented power to the premiers who have abused that authority in the most outrageous fashions. We've had police handcuffing a pregnant woman for her Facebook posts. We've had police choking women in the street. We've had police dragging women out of their cars for some COVID misdemeanor or another, throwing grannies to the ground, pepper spraying them, tackling individuals, smashing them onto the tarmac, and so on. To put it bluntly, we simply cannot trust state authorities with our freedoms. In order to supposedly keep people safe, some of them are prepared to treat those same people with inexcusable thuggery and violence. Of course, this poses even greater dangers when you start to demonise people or demonise certain classes of people, as is the case with the unvaccinated. The underlying desire to punish them, which is what I heard on the radio this afternoon, is palpable and disgusting. So I say to Scott Morrison and Greg Hunt, you have a job to protect the rights and safety of every Australian, even the 5%. Tomorrow, the onus is on the Prime Minister to stamp his authority on the state premiers and demand an end to the vilification of the unvaccinated and an end to widespread mandatory vaccination and vaccine passports. Now is the time, as yet another variant looms, as bringing boosters forward as being contemplated. Now is the time for the Prime Minister to show clear, unequivocal leadership and demand of the premiers an immediate end to mandatory vaccinations, or else he should disband the National Cabinet. The irony is, on the very week that the government is explaining the concept of religious discrimination and why it is wrong to penalise people for their beliefs, the government is ignoring that the profoundly held beliefs of some 5% or more of the population are being trampled on by the premiers and by big businesses and small businesses. Families in turmoil, individuals traumatised, jobs sacrificed on the altar of mandatory vaccination. This has to stop. We learned today that it's almost certain the next federal election will be held in May after a March 29 budget. Tomorrow, Mr. Morrison, please show the leadership you were elected at the last election to provide to every Australian. That is the surefire way to actually win an election, to deserve it.